So here we are. Okay, so let me just pull up the little prompts here. Oh shoot. Okay. So the first question that we're to talk about says, from your personal experience, what have been key behaviors in effective teams?
Anybody want to go first? I can go first. And I'm just referring my discussion document, so you can all refer to that too if you want. No, I'm just kidding. So one of the first things like that is important that I've noticed is like being able to establish ways of communication. Because if you don't know how people communicate or like what ways to prefer to communicate, then there's going to be a lot of miscommunication. Like if somebody doesn't have a cell phone and can't text, yet everybody else in the group is in this big group chat, then that person's left out, you know, or if somebody doesn't use their email and it's an email string like we've experienced, you know, so stuff like that. So just figuring out how people prefer to have communication, like whether it's a phone call, text message, email, in person, and then kind of adapting to that has been one of the important things I've found. And then just being able to delegate and listen, but another important one. Anybody else?
Well, one of the key behaviors that I think is important is having an equal surface, like making sure that every team member is part and equal and doesn't feel like they're being left behind or that they're not as smart or their opinion doesn't matter. I think that that's important because you want everyone to feel like a valid member. And if you're not, then they're probably just going to sit back and be like, nobody cares, so I'm not going to give my input, even though they might have a lot of useful information to share and a different way of looking at things.
I see that too. And another thing that I think is really important for effective teams is that everybody's united with the same goal. And so kind of discussing that from the beginning is important, because if everybody's pushing different agendas and working at different things,
some other things that I was thinking about was a willingness to be able to speak. I know sometimes it can be hard, and obviously some of the things we talked about help create that culture, but everyone in the group has to be willing to participate. I think that's a huge part, as well as creating a culture where with open minds. Sorry, my computer's dying.
Oh no.
Yeah. Yep. There we go. Yeah. So creating a culture and an environment where people can feel that safety. Like Tara was saying, there's just a lot of importance to being able to feel like you can share your opinion, and a lot of that comes from the way we respond. In the reading, it talked about like the ability to read eye language and stuff like that. And I think has a lot to do with creating a good culture and behaviors where we can respect people's responses.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. And well, this question specifies that we should draw from personal experience. So I don't know if anybody has like an example of an effective or an ineffective team that they were in or witnessed that they want to share.
I've got one. So when I went to LDS Business College before I was at BYUI, and one of the things we did was we took a communications class, and in that class we had to take a strengths finders test where we all learned our top 5 strengths, and then we were arranged in groups based upon our strengths. So there was like one person who had really great executive strengths, another person who had really great emotional and relationship strengths. Anyways, so then we all just got together and had a really big discussion about like what each person's assignment in the group was going to be and how they were going to accomplish it. And it was really interesting how we because we knew each other's strengths and knew how it worked, we were able to tailor their assignments based upon that. So I was able to say, I have the more executive strengths, which makes sense to me because I'm like always one that's like, okay, I'm going to be team leader, just naturally because I like to do that. But anyways, so I like delegated everything to everyone, and then like people who really liked like artistic abilities and stuff like that, like they did the arranging and the decorating of the PowerPoint and stuff like that. So it was really interesting once we found out what each other's strengths were, how we could see that in each other, and how it was no longer, oh, you have a weakness because you don't do it this way. It was rather, you have a strength because you do it differently, and I understand why you do it differently.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I had an experience. I've had one really good group team experience where for the whole semester in one of my classes we were in a team, and we would work on homework assignments and projects throughout the entire semester. And it was interesting because in the reading, it was totally a team B experience where for some whatever reason we were just very open. We would sometimes get together outside of the group meetings. We would always chat about extra stuff, and sometimes it would take a little bit longer than was required to meet simply because we were just having a good time with it. But we always seemed to do really well, and we would win presentations, and we would just have a good time. And we always had these crazy ideas that started off as a joke and then ended up in a serious matter where it worked and we could make things work. And so it was interesting just to see that how when everyone's on board with the same concepts of, whether it being the serious team meeting or the joking, having a good time team meeting, how everyone was on board and on that same page, and we all got along, and it was just awesome.
That's cool.
So I'm in a different situation than all of you, it appears. I'm married and have children. You might be married, I can't tell, but you're all young. So the best team experience that I can give you is my family and how we get together and talk about things and we work together. It's not mom's responsible for all the cooking and all the cleaning and all the laundry. It's we all help as a group. And so in doing that and understanding that we're a family, our family needs to help out. Mom and dad are both in school too, as well as all three of the kids. So we all have to do our fair share. And I think that just everybody being on the same level, and I think it was Victoria that talked about goals, having the same goal in mind makes a huge difference. And that really helps a team work, is if you know what your goal is and how you can help accomplish that goal and make it work in the best way possible.
That's awesome. So I have one to share too. And it wasn't like a group like your guys', but it was I'm married now. But when he was my boyfriend, my husband had a really cool group of roommates, and it was crazy because they all came from really different backgrounds. It was like there was a kid from Mexico who was openly gay, and there was a guy from, I want to say, Taiwan, who didn't really speak a lot of English. And then there was a guy there who was a recent convert who was studying plants. And then there was another guy who was like gun rights activist, like manly man. And my husband was like into musicals and art. And they were all together and they had such a good relationship. It always amazed me because like the sink would fill up with plates because they're all just gross. And one of them would say, "Hey, can you help me with the dishes?" And the other one would be like, "Sure." And it was just so crazy to me because it was a really stark contrast from my apartment where there was like leaving notes on the fridge, lots of like passive aggressive, sending text messages, but like being really nice to each other's faces, And I really admired that in that group of people was their like open communication, and they wouldn't get offended by things like that. Like, "Hey, you kind of left a mess last night. Will you clean up the living room a little bit?" And they would be like, "Sure," and they would do it. And I thought that was really good, and that the key to that was the open communication and just not being offended and not offending each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was good. Okay, so the next question is, what do group norms have to do with effective team building? Let's start with that.
Well, I'll go first again. Okay. I just think like the group norms that you set shape the overall health of the group. Like, if it becomes a dictatorship from like the first meeting get go, like it's gonna take a lot of effort to change it, to become more of a discussion, like later on, like to be more equal. So like a first meeting or that first time you meet with each other, like when you set those group norms and you kind of figure out how it works, that's when it's really important, because if you don't have good group norms, if you don't have good like kind of like boundaries or rules, like we all share, we all work together, then it's not going to work well. Like what Tara said with her family, like you all work together, the family unit, you have the same goal. You don't just say, okay, mom's in charge of this, dad's in charge of this, but it's shared responsibilities. I think that's how a group should be like the best. Like obviously we all are going to have our different strengths. Like one of us likes to clean the windows, and then but we're all cleaning together. Like and so it's just like establishing from the get go that it's not just mom's responsibility to do this or dad's responsibility to do that. That's like an important group norm to establish at the beginning. And so when you don't establish those, it's like everything just explodes. It doesn't work very well together.
Right. Well, and also, like you said, Madeline, when you were in your communications class and you actually talked about your strengths when you first met as a group, I think that's important, because then you know how each person is and what their strengths are. Not only that, but maybe some of their weaknesses, because some people are more shy and don't feel comfortable, sharing as much or participating as much. But, you want to find ways to help them feel more comfortable so that they can. And I think by figuring out how the different personalities click together makes a huge difference on the way the group is going to be effective or not effective.
Well, if you guys are interested, maybe we could like take a second to share what we feel our strengths are in this group.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Madeline says she's like naturally a leader. Maybe is there anything else like we should know?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just very much like a planner, so I like to have things planned out. I like to say, okay, this is when this is gonna happen. This is it's like having a set time every week. Like that works great. And just like knowing ahead of time, like we weren't gonna meet yesterday, that was awesome, because then I could like rearrange all my plans and work it all together. And just like I'm very business minded, so like business leadership, business writing, stuff like that, that comes very naturally to me. So my strengths are along the lines of like, yeah, leadership, and that like I want to make sure we get everything done and it's on time, but also just in like wanting to make sure that everyone's participating. And I don't know, those are kind of a random assortment of strengths, but kind of the main ones that I use in class and stuff.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, I'll share mine. It's kind of awkward, but I am more people oriented, and I think that's my strength. It's like more like the emotional, like that kind of stuff, like interpersonal relationships and all. And I also lean very creative. My major is actually apparel entrepreneurship, so it's interdisciplinary. So half my classes are like artistic design, sewing, and the other half of my classes. And that's pretty much how I am. I'm a pretty good balance, but yeah, I like creative.
Wow.
That's cool. I'm more of the numbers kind of guy. I'm an accounting major, so I'm very numbers oriented and like data and like specific stuff. But also I feel like a lot of times I'm kind of like I'm a filler. I'm whatever the group kind of needs me to be. I was a little slow this time, but usually I kind of hang back and wait and see if somebody else will take the lead. But if nobody does, I'll jump in and be the leader. Or if it's a little serious, then I don't like serious, so I need to step in and say a funny joke. If everyone's just messing around and we don't have any direction, I need to throw in a comment to steer us back on track. I feel like those are kind of things that I notice that I do. So I think those are strengths, I guess. I've never taken a cool study or anything, but I just, taking a stab in the dark there. But yeah.
That's good. And I like that you said you were a feeler, because I've never heard it that way, but I'm the same type of person. Like, I'll sit back and see if somebody's going to take the lead. And if they don't, I'll step up and take the lead. But I prefer not to. I am the shy introvert person that doesn't do what Victoria does. I'm not a people person. I like online because I can just do my work and not have to do anything. And then all of a sudden they throw all these discussions on us. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Right.
But that's okay. But my strengths, I am a very organized person, very detail oriented. I pay attention to a lot of details and make sure everything works out exactly how it's supposed to. Normally I'm not a flake, and so thank you again for letting me get out of yesterday. But that shows also my teacher calls me when she needs help because she knows I'll be there. So I'm very reliable for when I'm asked to do things. But I don't know. That's about it.
Hey, and those are great strengths. Like, we all need those detail-oriented things. I wish I was more detail-oriented. Like, I can get stuff done and it's like pretty good, but I'm like, oh, if only I had that detail-oriented skill, which I really don't. I really don't. It's a mess all the time.
See, and I really want to be a people person and creative, and I am none of that at all.
But I think that just shows, like, that although all of us have these different strengths and we wish that we could have other ones, we really have the ones we have because that's what's important to us and that's what we're good at. And,
yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like Heavenly Father has blessed each of us individually because we're all going to work together and bring it all together. Like, Stetson's going to be the filler and whatever we all don't have, Stetson's going to be it, So we're all just going to work together and get it all done. And I think that's one of the important things about groups is just making sure, like, that whatever skill you do have, because we're all going to have groups like this and families like this where it's like all of us are completely different, like that we're open to that. And I really liked, Victoria, that you just went ahead and said, okay, well, what are our strengths so that we could figure that out. And I think that's like, I really a lot talked in my comments about like how important it is to listen and share and be vulnerable. But I think that's really important in groups, and that's like what we just did. And so I really enjoyed that. Thanks all for sharing.
I agree.
Yeah, that was cool.
It was, and it's cool that we got like a good mix of everybody. Because it would suck if we were all competing for the same kind of place in the group,
Yeah.
Yes.
So this actually like very nicely leads into the next question, which is, what would you say your current group norms include, spoken and unspoken ones?
That's interesting, considering we haven't met very much.
Right? No, when I was reading over that, I was like, well, I missed the meeting last week, and it's rearranged this week for me. So I have no idea what it's like, but I know that they're flexible with me, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's the norm we have. That we're flexible with each
other. Yeah. And that's kind of what I thought about too, was how we're flexible and adaptable, and we were able to change last week and this week. And something I wrote down was, experience creates flexibility and understanding, which I really do feel like flows in our group. And like with all the email communication, with changing from emails to text messages, like I really feel like because all of us are understanding and like empathetic, like it's great, because then we can say, oh, Tara has this problem, we can't meet this date, let's move to tomorrow. Like, no problem at all. Like, of course we'll do that for you, because we all understand, we all want good grades in class. And so if that means we have to move to a different day, that's fine. So I feel like that's a really great strength, that even though it's only like week 2 of meeting together, we've all have established that already.
That's cool. I think we also have a norm. I think it just happened naturally of everybody speaking equally and having the chance to talk. Like nobody dominates the conversation and nobody's too scared to share. So I think that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say too. Just that we have a good flow of speaking. I think probably when it comes to online, one of the biggest things that I hate is when I start to say something, but because of lag, somebody else is as well. And so then you both start saying something and nobody can hear anything. And then you both stop and then you're like, no, you go ahead. No, you go ahead. And so naturally, sometimes I tend to just wait and wait and wait and make sure that nobody's going to say anything before I interrupt. But yeah, so it's interesting the different in difference in communication online versus in person. It's very interesting, but yeah, we definitely have that.
Okay, and then the next question I feel like we already answered. It says, are they healthy group norms?
Yes.
Yes, they are. Do you have any unhealthy group norms?
I can't think of any.
Only time will tell.
Right.
We're perfect. So let's go to the next question. The next question is, how does psychological safety in a team increase overall effectiveness?
I think kind of just what we all discussed, like when we're open and can share like what our strengths are, that creates a desire to be successful. And because we know each other better, we're able to be more effective and be like, okay, yeah, we can totally do that. Like I know Victoria likes to be creative. Let's have her help us with this, stuff like that. I don't know. I'm very much a person that's like, if I don't know a person on an individual basis, it's really hard for me to work with them. Like, I have a supervisor at work where it took me months and months and months for me to be able to relate with her because she just was very much kept things personal. Like even just like everyday things like, oh, like what did you do yesterday? And she's like, nothing. And I'm like, like, I want to know about you. Like I want to be able to like relate to you in some way, right? And so like creating a psychologically safe environment is being able to share those things and to be able to relate to them. And even if it's just like something simple, like, oh, I walked my dog yesterday. I'm like, cool. What kind of dog do you have? Like just simple things like that. Because I feel like if there's no personal connection, then there's no way that you can really connect and have a good relationship, even in a workplace, because it's like they're just a body that speaks, instead of like they're a human being that has feelings. And that's just my opinion.
I actually agree with everything that you just said, Madeline, because it makes it easier to communicate in a group when you know the individuals instead of just knowing the surface information. Because when there's just surface information, you're just walking by saying, hey, how are you today? And keep going. You're not really waiting for an answer because you know they're not going to give one. So it makes it hard to communicate as a team. And when you're a team, you need to be working really hard to get along with each other and to understand each other. And again, I'm glad that Victoria stopped it and said, hey, let's talk about everybody's strengths, just to kind of let us get to know each other a little bit better and know what each person is like. And I think that makes a huge difference in feeling safe, because me, as the introvert and shy person, I'm not usually willing to share a whole lot. Even though I know I'm supposed to, it is still hard, And so knowing that we all have strengths and weaknesses, we understand that nobody's perfect, and it makes it easier to share and help each other in the areas that they need versus expecting everybody to have 100%, no matter if it's creativity or being personable or knowing all the numbers. We can help each other. And I think that helps people feel safe when they know it's a safe environment and nobody's going to get mad at me for not sharing because I'm having a really bad day and, being an introvert or, whatever the case may be.
I agree with that. And I think that that's part of our responsibility as a group is to make a safe environment. Because like like for example, my extended family, they're all nuts, but like anything you say around them can and will be used against you, and it's all in good fun. But it definitely doesn't like encourage personal sharing, you know? So I think like as long as everybody knows like no jokes are gonna be made at your expense and that people are going to understand and listen and appreciate you even if it's something personal, that creates a good environment.
Yeah. Kind of just tying that together, I think it's interesting how important it is when we create that safe environment, kind of like we talked about, it creates this willingness to be more vulnerable. And with that comes an open mind, the more ability, the more desire to share. And when that happens, there's just an increase of knowledge, an increase of creativity. It just pushes the group along further. And so it's interesting, like that chain. At least I see this chain of events where the environment can affect long-term really creativity and effectiveness by just the cultures and being able to share more, being more vulnerable, and just the creative mind.
Okay, so unless anybody has more to say on that, the next question is, what are the rules of communication and empathy, including psychological safety? So I guess we kind of talked about that, but we can expand a little more. Rules of communication and empathy.
I think kind of just to go along with that, like to continue on with my example, like it took me months to relate to my supervisor. And so like by the end of those months, before she finally just kind of started to open up, I was like, yeah, like just because the relationship at work is so strained, I like didn't even want to go to work. I was like, I don't want to go. I'm gonna quit my job. I'm gonna get a new job. And it really makes the statement true that like people quit their jobs not because they're quitting the job, but because they're quitting their boss or their supervisor. I don't know if any of you read that, but it's like come up in my readings all the time. But it's just like one of those things where it's like if you can't communicate well and if there's no emotional empathy or like ability to connect emotionally, then it really doesn't create a psychologically safe environment. Like whenever she would talk about something I needed to improve or change, I was always like, she's attacking me. Like I don't feel like she can relate to me at all. Like does she even like me? Instead of it coming from a place of let me help you become better, like by helping you learn how to do these things better. So it's just like when you have those things, it makes it less of an attack and more of a helping, improving environment. I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that, but that was just my little example.
I just guess like in a more practical way, we could. Well, I'll just say I don't know about you guys, but like I live in Kansas right now with my in-laws, and my husband works all day, and so like I don't have a lot of people to talk to. So if you guys ever like have something you want to talk about outside of class, this is open to, and I'm down for more friends.
Sounds good.
Put that out there. All right.
Okay. We're good.
Okay. All right. How does sharing personal experience and being vulnerable influence team dynamics? I feel like this is a lot of the same question worded differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and just a quick thought on that one, like sharing personal experiences and being vulnerable. Like Victoria, you just shared, I need more friends, and that's very much like a thing where it's like sharing one of those. It doesn't have to be like this big personal experience like the guy did where he's like, I have cancer. Like that's a big reveal. Like boom, like whoa, the things just got super serious. But just even like the little like, hey, if you guys want a friend or like to text or chat or whatever, or even just like Tara when you're like went to kindergarten and went on the field trip and so you're able to ask you about it, like those little vulnerable personal experiences, like it gives us something to talk about when we're waiting for everyone to join in. Or like I can text Victoria and be like, hey, we're in 2 classes this semester, how you doing on this, something like that. And I think that's important, because I think all of us really do need friends, like even in the workplace, even at school. Like it's you can't just be limited to like, oh, at church and like I don't know.
Yeah, and just like on a broader level, sharing personal, vulnerable things is what brings people together. Like if you sit down with somebody and say a bunch of personal things, you're gonna walk out of that room like a lot closer to that person. And so if we're gonna work well as a team, then it makes sense that we should work well together as people, and that's just something that helps bring people together.
I just think it makes people seem real. I mean, I know we already talked about this earlier, but yeah, it just when you share personal experiences and you get to know people, it creates a reason to be empathetic for them. It makes them see. I think it was Madeline who said it makes them seem like a real person instead of just some robot that's filling this spot in the team. And so when people become real and you have real events and real challenges, there's a lot more empathy and a lot more open-mindedness involved in the setting. And so I just think that's important.
Yep.
I kind of mentioned kind of my bad roommate situation last time I was living in roommate housing, and one of the reasons was that we didn't share personal things. We weren't like friends on any other level besides like roommates, and we would get upset with each other. But once I found out things that my other roommates were going through, it definitely made it easier to forgive and understand and be able to like approach and address problems that we were having, because like Stetson said, it made them more human, and it wasn't just like this villain who never cleans her dishes. She was like suddenly a girl with like problems and things that I could relate to.
Yeah. I think sorry. I think President Eyring said in the last general conference, and I don't remember if this was like the women's session or when he said it, but he just said, if you go in and every time you meet a person, if you just meet them with the thought that, this is a person who has a ton of like life problems, then like 50% of the time you're going to be correct. And he's like, I learned that when I was young, and now I'm like pretty sure that it's like 95% of the time that's pretty much correct. Like these people have problems, and when you go into it thinking that, knowing that, you treat them differently than it's like, oh, this person has a perfect life, And I really like what Victoria said. Like when you realize that, oh, they do have struggles just like I do, it makes it a totally different conversation than if it was just like, oh yeah, they just leave their dishes there, or they just don't do their work right, something like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that definitely helps you have the empathy that you need for others when you realize that everybody doesn't have a perfect life. Nobody has a perfect life. Most people are going through something at one point in time or another, or constantly going through things. It may not be the same thing that you're going through, but you never know how or what's going on in their life. But if you have empathy towards them and know that they're probably struggling with something, even though you can't see it on the surface, take the time to get to know them, and you'll find out things. Like Victoria said with her roommate, she realized that stuff was going on, and it made you understand better on how you could be around her and what you could do or say to her, and maybe ways that you could make her life easier or better, help out a little.
And Madeline and I shared some personal experiences with this, but that's what the next question is asking if anybody has personal experiences in, I'll read it, what it exactly says. Do you have any personal examples of this in organizations you're involved in?
I work at Cabela's, and I have some interesting and fun coworkers. And over the summer, I had 3 of my coworkers that just work in my department leave. They went on leave, and so they didn't just quit. There wasn't open positions. They just were gone, and so I was like the only one in my department for a while. And it was interesting because 2 of them we had we were sharing personal experiences. We had talked to each other a lot. There was a lot of understanding, and so I knew why they were leaving. I knew where they were going, and so it was almost like I was happy for them, and it was like, oh yeah, cool, no worries, it's awesome. But there was one who just kind of up and left, and he was an older gentleman who we didn't really communicate a lot more than business oriented, stuff like that. I don't know anything about his personal life. I don't know what he was going through, but it made it really hard um, to understand, like, well, where is he? Where'd he go? Like, why is he gone all of a sudden? And then there's rumors that he did this or that, or that he had surgery, and so he came back, and I was like, oh, like, how was your surgery? And he was like, I didn't have surgery. What are you talking about? I was like, oh, well, then why the heck are you gone, slacker? And so it's just a lack of understanding. And then he had started a project, and I had showed up, and then I had to finish his project, and it just created a little bit of anger towards him, because it was like, man, like, you're a slacker, you don't show up, I don't know anything about you, are you even a real person? And then you just dumped this project on me, and so I was a little frustrated with it, but for a while, until it's fine, I can take care of it, not a big deal. But it was just interesting, the dynamic where I knew things about the other two's lives, that it was fine, and I didn't really have any animosity towards them, but just the one individual, because I didn't know anything about him, it was harder to have empathy for him being gone for whatever it was that he was gone for. And similar with other coworkers, I've noticed that I found that there were a couple coworkers who I thought were members of the church, and then I found out they weren't, and all of us, because of shared experiences. And then all of a sudden I have this newfound respect for them because of experiences they've shared, which they have just this light about them. And then I find out, that there are certain things about them. It's just, it creates this new respect, and all of a sudden I find myself talking to them more and caring about them more because of just the sharing of personal lives. Whereas there's some coworkers on the other side of the store, I don't know anything about them, and simply because I don't know anything about them, I don't care to know anything about them,
Yeah.
which is sad. I'm gonna fix that. But yeah, it's interesting.
It is. So the only organization I can come up with is, maybe since I don't work, is like with my visiting teaching or ministering now. But there was this one lady that I have visit taught for the past 7 years, and they will not change me from being her visiting teacher / minister, because I've been able to ask her about her situation, ask her what's going on in life, and she's open to sharing things with me. And that was something that you don't always get when you're doing your assignments, But if you take it one step further and actually make it to where you care about the individual and try to be their friend and start sharing those personal experiences, I was surprised at what she told me. And I found out a lot of information and things that she was going through that nobody else has a clue about. And she didn't want it to go any further because, she just wants to keep it and deal with her situation herself. But I'm glad that I was able to get her to open up so that I can be there. And when she's having struggles, she can come to me and I can help her through it or talk her through it, and, just be a listening ear sometimes to what's going on in her life. But if I wouldn't have taken the time to prod her and, really try and be her friend and get her to open up, I don't think it would be the same situation we're in right now. And I know I've had other visiting teaching people that I go to, and it's like we say, hey, how are you? Great. Can we do anything for you? Nope. And they don't want to go any further than that. But we have to take the time to actually try to get in further and ask prodding questions so that they'll be willing to share and really feel like you care about them. And I think that them knowing that you care about them helps for them to be able to open up with personal experiences.
I can't remember which talk it was, but some talk during conference, someone was talking about ministering. It was on Saturday, I think. But they mentioned is that we shouldn't just say, like, is there anything I can do to help you? But asking questions like, do you want to talk about it?
Mm-hmm.
It goes along with what you said. So, can draw it back to the gospel and really connecting with people in all areas.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same. And my thought was about how we're supposed to change our discussions in Relief Society and Elders Quorum, and how we should make them more of a discussion. And so then it just made me think, like, it needs to be a safe haven, a place where we can be vulnerable and share those experiences. And I know I'm skipping ahead, but the next question is, what can you do as an individual to initiate effective team behavior? And that just makes me think, like, we can be the ones who can initiate being vulnerable, sharing those experiences, helping others, like what Tara said, how she just was able to connect with this lady when nobody really had before. And I think we each will have those opportunities to do that, but also we can just on Sundays, like in our discussions in Relief Society, you know, when someone asks a question, we can be brave enough to answer it, maybe share a personal experience, because then we can relate to people better. I know I taught one lesson this past year about the temple and Relief Society, and we had just a big discussion about people's personal experiences and how the temple helps them. And like, it was a very good opportunity to like share. And something interesting that happened afterwards was there was one sister who came up to me afterwards, and she's like, you know, the first time I went through the temple and for my own endowments, it like freaked me out and it was super scary, and, you know, all these things. And I haven't gone back in 3 years. And I was like, what? And she's like, but now, like, because of this lesson and because I've heard all these things, I really have a desire to go back to the temple and see if I can have a better experience, because all these people shared all their great experiences. And I was like, see, this is why we need this. So,
What experience?
yeah.
I guess, like, continue answering that question about being an individual initiating is, what is it? Effective team behavior. I think a lot of it is being vulnerable, and it's like, for some people more than others, it can be like awkward and scary, especially if that's not one of the group norms, is sharing things. But when you open up it, and even if you don't say anything, it invites other people to do the same. So I think what Madeline said about like sharing things in church and in Relief Society is totally true, because if somebody shares something really personal and relevant, everybody else is going to feel a lot more comfortable to do the same. So even if your comment doesn't directly help someone like Madeline's did, it could invite somebody who's shyer to say something that could help you.
Yeah, I think another part of it is just asking probing questions, asking questions that show you care, and that invites others to also have those experiences where they maybe can share or be a little bit more vulnerable. Again, kind of like Madeline was saying at work, where she would go in every day and try to ask, is it a manager or something like that?
Yeah.
Ask her questions, and she obviously wasn't responding as we would have liked. But I think by taking that step, you can find individuals that will be willing to share, and also throughout time, you can show that you do care, even if there's not that initial, oh, they asked this one question, maybe they care. Eventually, over time, people will, I guess, soften up, you could say, and so that's a lot of it too. I think just being able to have a desire to care about people and to know more about them, to ask the questions, to help people be more vulnerable.
So what I would add is that it's all about attitude. Because if you come into a group just do what you're supposed to do. Like we're just doing it for the assignment. Let's just do it. You're not going to have the same attitude. Like I feel like we've actually opened up to each other. We're getting a lot out of it. I mean, I felt like I learned a lot when I read the article from Google, and I was really intrigued by it. But I think it comes back to our attitude, and if we're willing to be part of a team, and if we're willing to put forth our effort as an individual to actually try, I think it makes a huge difference to how the entire team will work out, is everybody's individual attitude. Because if you just come in there like, hey, let's just do it, 5 minutes later we're done, move on, I don't think you're going to get as much out of it, and it's not going to be a good environment to promote all of the sharing or getting to know each other or being open-minded and really putting forth for the best answers that you're looking for.
Yes, I agree.
And I think we've done a good job of that too. Like Phil said, like we haven't just done to get it done or do a bare minimum, but I feel like we've done some real connecting and really explored these ideas and put them into practice too. Yeah.
I think we did good, team.
Yep. It's good. Now we're just missing our other group member, so if everybody could find some way to reach out to him. I don't know. Maybe he drops a class, or maybe he doesn't check his email. I don't know, but maybe we could message him on Island.
Oh.
Messaging. Mm-hmm.
Maybe mention to our teacher. Mention to him that we haven't heard from him, then we could get him more involved.
Chicken works.
Yes. We can do that.
Okay. I guess we will conclude and just ask me to provide a brief summary of our discussion. Which, if I had to sum it up, would be share things. Let people share things. Yep. Share things and let people share things. Does anybody else have a good a point they wanted to make sure got re-mentioned?
I really like Tara's point about having a good attitude about it. I think, the good attitude, being vulnerable, and then listening and letting other people be vulnerable. I think those three things are very important to make a good team. And I mean, if you have those things, sometimes obviously it's not all going to work out like you want it to, but it's better than the alternative. So.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and at the beginning we talked a lot about communication too. So I would say like communication, vulnerability, and attitude.
Good summary to me.
Yep.
Yep. Sounds good.
Anybody have any last comments?
Thank you again. I just feel bad, but I appreciate you guys so much for doing it today instead of yesterday. So thank you.
And you know what? Thank you for sending the email and explaining why. Because like, if it was just like, oh, I can't do it today, I would have been like, oh, okay, whatever. But because like there was a reason and you shared with us, like I really was like, oh, that's completely understandable. Of course we can move it. Like
it's exactly what we talked about.
I was gonna say, it's almost like she was vulnerable, and now we see her as a real person instead of just a random.
Thank you.
Speaking of the other random teammate, I just messaged him and gave him my number, so we'll see if he responds.
Okay. Efficient. Okay.
alrighty.
That's him. All right, then. I think we're good. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. I'll see you guys next week.
Yeah.
All right. See you next week.
Thanks, Victoria.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.